Welcome to The Funnel. My name is John Shane. I'm president of Alignment Group. This is episode 232 of The Funnel. Sales leaders, do you listen to your team? Before we get started, I'm going to remind you to head on over to alignment-group.com/The Funnel. Subscribe, and we will send you the weekly newsletter. That includes everything we've published for the past week in the podcast and the Insights blog. You can also head on over to Alignment Group and go to the library. Download the Best Of series. That's the Best of the Funnel and Insights. And the first series is on the 6-step hiring process. Everything is aggregated into one ebook. Today's agenda. Do we have a problem? Walk in their shoes. What's not being said? Focus on the topic. All right. Do we have a problem? So what do I mean by that? Well, most of us are bad listeners. Let's just get that out. It's amazing how often you have to repeat yourself. Or if you're communicating something to someone and they answer a different question. Now, all you have to do is listen to a politician or a pundit or someone that's being interviewed that has talking points. They never really answer the question. So I'm not sure if they're bad listeners or they're just bad people. But that's the truth. We're not very good listeners. We have a lot of stuff we're tracking every day. We're worried about the goal, worried about the revenue, worried about the individuals. And we're doing all of that in between meetings and coaching sessions, et cetera, et cetera. And then someone walks by and says, hey, now in my world, my last position as VP of Sales, open door policy was amazing. People just walked in your office and started talking to you. And sometimes it's not something you really want to hear or you really want to talk about because you just don't have the time and you're not in the mood for it. Now, sometimes you sit there and pretend to listen and your mind's wandering all over the place. You're not really hearing what's being said. Maybe that person rubs you the wrong way. So every time they talk, it's like the old Peanuts cartoon with Charlie Brown. And I think it was just brilliant. The voice that they use for the adults. It was this wah-wah sound. And really what they were saying is kids never really hear what an adult's saying, right? It's just this noise that's coming at them. They're not really listening. And it's the same here for you as a manager or a salesperson. They're not really listening. You're not really listening. You pretend to pay attention. But what you really need to focus on is how to do that, how to pay attention and hear what they're saying. First of all, you get a strong reputation if you do that. Second of all, you're very helpful. I would say therapists are probably very good at that. How many of us out there have kids that don't hear a word we're saying? Can you imagine being a teacher in today's world? I mean, it takes a great amount of strength because they're not really listening or paying attention. So I think we do have a problem. And I think the best thing we can do is admit it and figure out how to solve it. And I put down here rinse and repeat because I think that's what you need to do. You need to figure out how to be a good listener and then rinse and repeat regardless of who's sitting across from you. That's good practice. So I want to give you some ideas on what good listeners do, and maybe it'll help you. So the next topic on the agenda is walk in their shoes. You ever hear advice or somebody gives you advice to walk in someone else's shoes for a day? It's one of the things that I focused a lot on with my salespeople early on in their career with me, or when I took over a team. I wanted them to get an understanding of how other people view the world and how they do their jobs. And in some cases, that's just a learning experience, right? You want to complain about and the admin staff or the support staff or this or that. Get a feel for what they do every day, all day. And I'll never forget a story that, it's not really a story, it's an experience that I had. We had a guy that was in a support role, doing a lot of networking for us, talking the technical side of networking. And it was the early stages of internet and building networks in offices and that sort of thing. So we were kind of the leading edge, front edge of that stuff. And part of our support staff was to network our products for them so they didn't have to do it. And he was always complaining, the reps were always complaining about him. It never got done. It was this, it was that. Well, I decided to go out in the field with him for a day or two, and it was a rainy Friday, and I got to the office early, and we met and jumped in the car. And before we jumped in the car, his phone was ringing. He must have answered 10 phone calls, responding to voicemails, setting things up. And we went out in the field and we made a ton of calls, appointments to customers, and we set up the devices on the network. And while he was doing that, there were constant interruptions. The phone was ringing off the hook. His voicemail box literally filled up in one day. It just didn't end. It was nonstop chaos for this man. I came back to the office and I said to my boss, A, I'm surprised he's still working for us. B, I'm surprised he hasn't lost his ever-loving mind. Because if I was in that job, I would have quit already. We need to help him. I walked in his shoes for a day, and I was shocked he was working at the level he was working at. And then we began to solve the problem. So the point is I learned a lot from that experience. There's a ton of wisdom in walking in somebody else's shoes. And that is part of what good listeners do. They focus on that other person, what they're saying. They ask good questions. They listen in a very intense and deep way. They're trying to see what the other person is saying from their perspective. And if you do that, they feel like you hear them. And in some cases, you'll get progress on whatever problem you're trying to solve. Sometimes you might be at odds with somebody, but you'll get agreement. And maybe if you need movement from them, you'll get buy-in. Oftentimes, you'll see, if you're good at this, that the final solution or resolution to whatever problem that was brought to the table is going to be completely different than what maybe any of us thought it would be from the beginning. And why did that happen? Because you listened. And it wasn't a one-sided conversation. They talked, you half listened, you barked out some response, and they left your office. Or you're rushed to move on because you have other things to do. And you're just trying to get them an answer. You're not really creating an environment that's conducive to problem solving and to good listening. Good listening means you need to slow down. Why is that? Because our brain isn't wired to connect at the speeds we need it to connect at. Because people talk twice as fast as we can process what they're saying. Does this make sense? I hope it does. I think I might have said that backwards, though. I think our ability to process is much faster than their ability to speak. Right? So we're moving ahead of them. How many times you've been in a conversation with somebody and you're already formulating a response to them because you have an answer? I do it. I'm not perfect. I'm not a great, perfect listener. I think I'm a good listener. I work at it a lot, but I'm not always on. Sometimes you're just in a hurry to give an answer. And it frustrates people. So we have to slow down and pace ourselves at the pace that they're talking. You just have to sit back and listen and process what's being said to you. Slow and steady wins the race, right? That's what we're talking about. Taking your time, putting yourself in their shoes, and focusing on what's being said, especially from their point of view. How many times have you dealt with little kids, children, small children? Best way to communicate to small children is on bended knee. Don't stand over them and bark at them. Come down to their level. Get on a knee, look them in the eye, and talk to them. Listen to what they're saying at their pace and respond. You'll be surprised how much movement you get with kids when you do that. How much you can understand the world from their point of view. It's the same in here. I give you a good example of riding in the car with Dave, spending the day in the field with him. Same thing. Walk in their shoes. Next, it's what's not being said. So if you ever watch the movie with Hitch, the movie Hitch. You ever watch the movie Hitch? It's about a guy who understands body language and teaches people how to find the love of their life through dating. And in the beginning, first 4 minutes of the movie, if you just watch that segment, it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. It's the body language. Body language is critical. I had somebody, a mentor years ago, tell me if you just listen long enough, people will tell you what you want to hear. They'll tell you everything. They'll tell you everything. You sit in a meeting and you just watch and listen, they'll tell you everything. They'll tell it to you through their verbal communication, through their nonverbal communication, body language, emotions. You pay attention to that, like facial expressions, gestures, the tone of their voice. It all changes the meaning. That's why texting and emails stink, because they really don't convey that part of the communication, the body language, the nonverbal. Sometimes people dance around the subject. They're not comfortable hitting it head on. So they're not expressing what they feel or what they're thinking. So you have to look at that body language and those nonverbal cues and bring it out in the conversation. You can't remember everything someone said all the time. And you can't write it all down. Certainly, you could sit and record it. But again, that would not help you with the body language. So as you're trying to memorize something, something's getting missed. So pay attention. Sit back, watch. Look at the body language, the nonverbal cues. Look at the folks that are dancing around the subject. And you'll pick up a lot. People need to understand what you're saying. But you don't understand what they're saying. Both. Next is focus on the topic. Don't be sidetracked. So here's what happens. Somebody pops their head in, they come in a meeting, you start down one road talking about something. Then next thing you know, you're going down all these rabbit holes. Or you'll get endless details on something. And they're just giving you this sort of way too much. And this is so they make sure you understand exactly what they're saying. They just may want to vent to you. Or they may need your help just cheering them on. So understand what they're saying. Look at the central idea, the core of what they're talking about. You want to take something away from this conversation. You want to know why they started the conversation. It's okay sometimes to ask that. If you understand the motivation behind it, it can help you help them decide. You know, sometimes people come in and they sit down, they start telling you something, and you start giving them a response. They're like, I don't need an answer here. I just need your support. That's what I'm talking about. Find out the motivation, the central idea of what they're talking about, the core, because this could go on and on and on and on. Okay? So you can provide the best feedback possible. So here's what I do. I used to do the podcast here with Lindsay. And Lindsay is just amazingly smart and has very strong marketing abilities. But we would get into this podcast and she'd start down a marketing rabbit hole sometimes because her mind is just going so fast and she's spewing out all this stuff. So if you go back and listen to some of those old podcasts, what I would do is I'd listen to what she said, let it come out. I'd get the central idea, the core of what she was talking about. I wouldn't let it get sidetracked. Then I would come back and summarize the key points and validate that through her. Here's what I heard you say, Lindsay. And bang, bang, bang. I'd go through the key points. And she'd say yes or no. Most of the time she'd say, yeah, that's it. You got it. Okay? So I understood that she needed to go through this process, but we have listeners who want to know the core of this idea or thought, and they want it broken down into something that works for us. Now, here's something that I think you should focus on as well, and that's your own biases. We birds of a feather, right? So here, and I've mentioned this multiple times, we've come through an election about last November, and there's really sort of two sides of the coin, right? The conservative and the liberal. Liberal people love to talk to liberal people, so conservative people like to talk to conservative people. Conservative people are wrong to liberals. Liberals are wrong to conservatives. We like and are receptive to people who think the way we do, who are lying to us. Even if it's not true or doesn't make sense. And when they don't agree with us, we start shutting down. We turn it off. Some people are shouters. They over talk you or they shout at you. You have to understand these emotional filters that you have and understand your own prejudice and bias. So if you know somebody really annoys you and you don't agree with them, you slow down, take your time, understand why you're there and what you're there for. Reserve that judgment until you hear everything. It's liberating. Especially if you fall on one side of the political spectrum or the other. It's liberating when you really start paying attention to what people are saying instead of getting all frothed up on your own emotional biases and just take a step back and listen. You'll be amazed at what you can process. Then once they finish talking to you, then you can respond appropriately. But you need to put those biases aside to be a good manager. You really want to understand what they're saying and help them resolve their problem. It's not about being right. It's about listening, processing what's being said to you, and then providing a response that's appropriate. Again, don't forget to head on over to alignment-group.com and subscribe to the funnel. You can find us on Facebook. I'm on Twitter at ShayJohnR. LinkedIn. You can contact me, jshay at alignment-group.com. Of course, the website, alignmentgroup.com. Thanks for subscribing. And as always, keep filling the funnel.